Coming up on Fox 4 Sports Watch, Cowboys begin OTAs and we'll have the early returns on the running game and if it can be as effective as last season. We'll also talk about the reasons why Jordan Spieth is so successful and why he's confident he could win at Byron Nelson. And also why high school football recruiting is such an inexact science. We'll take a look at one case study. Fox 4 Sports Watch, let's do it.
You're listening to Fox 4 Sports with Edward Egros and Victor Nguyen.
Welcome to another installment of Fox 4 Sports Watch. I am Edward Egros, your neighborhood weekend sports anchor, alongside Victor Nguyen, your neighborhood sports producer.
Hello, everybody.
It is a glorious day in Dallas on this Wednesday, May 27th.
Wow,
we haven't had a whole lot of
out.
glorious days the last few days here in Dallas.
What is this weird thing that's shining stuff at us?
Some odd light coming from the eastern sky.
It is beautiful.
So we will go ahead and get started and carry the torch, as it were, concerning the glorious sunshine that we are having that may be very well short-lived. We'll get started talking about the Cowboys, and, of course, the biggest storyline this offseason is probably involving this running game. DeMarco Murray, the #1 leading rusher from last season, now with the Eagles. Now we're going to see what the rest of these running backs are capable of. What can Joseph Randle do? What can newly acquired Darren McFadden do? This very much is a running back by committee, but at the same time, there are a lot of guys who want to get that starting role and get as many carries as possible. Let's hear from a couple of the Cowboys about their running back situation.
Being able to be out here with these guys, once you've been in the place so long, like Oakland, you get set in your ways, and coming out here and just being around guys who are working so hard, just brings out the best in you, and it's something I really look forward to.
I got to give all those guys credit. I'm trying to mix them in. They're all getting chances with the ones, and they're performing. So, they know that there's a job to be won, and they all want it. But at the same time, they're going to work hard to help themselves, everybody get better. So if they get better, the team gets better.
Again, that was Darren McFadden and running backs coach Gary Brown talking about the running back situation. And it's interesting to me that Coach Brown put it in the perspective of there is a starter that will be named. There is one guy who's going to be leading this charge. And I'm not sure I buy that philosophy. I almost feel as if the Cowboys are pursuing a kind of running back by committee situation that obviously we didn't see last season because DeMarco Murray had so many carries. But if the philosophy of let's run the ball worked so effectively last year, if they're investing so much in this offensive line, then it would seem to me that the whole goal is to have as many or almost as many carries as they did last season. And at this point, we don't know if any one back can carry the load as much. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're seeing so many guys compete for possibly that fourth spot. Maybe there's even a fifth spot, and they'll convert them to some other position down the road. But it seems to me that this is more a committee situation. Maybe it will evolve into a traditional starting role and traditional starting backup situation. But right now, it is pretty much open to interpretation.
Yeah, it's obvious based on the names that we're looking at on the roster going into OTAs that nobody's going to get the 400 carries or whatever that DeMarco got last year. But does it seem to me that they're investing a whole lot more on Joseph Randle at this point, that he will be the guy that will at least get the not majority, but at least the most carries out of the group that's currently going into the situation right now?
It's interesting that Darren McFadden was pretty much practicing with the ones from what we saw at OTAs this Wednesday. But at the same time, they've invested so much in Joseph Randle. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. With all the off-the-field trouble that Joseph Randle has caused and the fact that the Cowboys have remained committed to him this entire time, it leads me to believe that he's truly a special talent. We just haven't seen it in large doses. He's been able to have almost the same average yards per carry that DeMarco Murray did last season. He was in perhaps tougher situations going into it, and plus he just didn't have the experience, and so you expect a bit of a dip. But the Cowboys have done so much to make sure he can stay in that backfield and stay a productive member for this team that it seems to me that they know something that perhaps the rest of the world doesn't know, and that is what his upside can be.
Yeah, and the knucklehead factor notwithstanding, and obviously that is a big factor, but Randle is the back on this roster at this point that is the most equipped to succeed, or at least replicate what DeMarco gave this team last year.
There was a real close relationship that I noticed between DeMarco and Joseph Randle. They really had each other's back, so to speak, not just on the field, but off the field as well with the interviews that we conducted with both of them. And it seems to me that that relationship was all about helping each other out, that they really knew that for one to succeed, the other needed to be successful as well. And even though one piece is gone, still that situation is there. And I think that's one of the reasons why they brought in someone like a Darren McFadden, somebody who kind of flew under the radar last year, came, pretty much replaced an injured running back up in Oakland because Oakland felt like he just wasn't able to carry the load much anymore. And he was quite successful last season when he was injury-free. So I look at someone like him to say, this is a situation where they can feed off of each other to be successful, and it will be not nearly as lopsided as what we saw last season.
When you look at McFadden, he is what he is. He's a cheap insurance policy.
And you also have someone like Lance Dunbar who will come in, and he probably won't be a starter per se, but he can definitely produce in certain situations.
Role, yeah.
And I think they may very well have a fourth option somewhere in there that may fill roles that maybe DeMarco was able to do, whether it's short yardage situations or something where it's, for more of a pass block protection kind of situation. So I do think that the coaches have to be a lot more creative than they were last year. But at the same time, when you have such an experienced offensive line coming in for another year, when you've got guys like Lyle Collins coming in who could probably learn this system very quickly, you've got the experience, you've got that veteran leadership, and now you are capable of being more creative with rich running backs you use in different situations. And that's nothing but an advantage for these Cowboys.
What do you make of the Cowboys bringing in a Ben Tate and a Felix Jones the other week? Is it more of what Stephen Jones had in mind of creating competition going into training camp, or is it an indication that the Cowboys aren't quite sold on the current group that they have right now and are looking elsewhere?
I'm not sure they even know, to be honest. I think this is a situation where you are pretty much trying things out at this point.
Yeah,
it's
first
May.
day of OTA.
Exactly. It's the end of May. They don't have a preseason game for another month and a half or so. They can pretty much do whatever they want at this point. They can bring in guys, off the street, see what they're capable of producing, and it may not even be to fill a role that we're even imagining at this point. And whatever the perception is, I don't think the Cowboys care, and I'm not sure even they know what they want to do with these guys that they're bringing in. But what's interesting, it's really two and a half months now that I think about it for a game coming up. So there's tons of time to figure out what they want to do with everybody. And hey, you know what? Roll the dice, see what happens. If anything cool comes up, then good for them. If not, well, you're not really investing in anybody. It's like the Tim Tebow Patriots thing from a couple years ago.
Exactly.
You're not giving anybody any money. You're just testing things out just to see if some random freaky combination works out. All right, so let's move on now to golf, and Jordan Spieth, the Dallas Jesuit product, finished second at the Colonial last week. And this is his third second-place finish in Texas this season at a PGA Tour event in Texas. Last season, 2 second-place finishes. Overall, he has 11 first- and second-place finishes, and he's only 21 years old. It's one of those things where you love the competitive spirit of Jordan Spieth. I love how much of an ambassador he is to golf right now, not just because of his age, not just because he's so successful, but it's because of his competitive spirit. He hates finishing second. He's finished second 3 times in Texas this season, and he hates it. He doesn't like the consistency or the fact that he's come so close, and maybe a couple of tweaks here and there, some fortunate breaks here and there would bring him over the top. No, he wants to win every single time he's out there. And you don't see that from as many golfers as you'd like to believe, because there's still massive payouts for finishing second. They understand sometimes that's just luck. No, Jordan Spieth wants to go out there and lap the field, and that's what I love about him so much. He's got a healthy second-place lead in the world golf rankings. Mm-hmm. He's very much dead set in that spot. He still has a long way to go to catch up to Rory McIlroy, who's number 1 in the world golf rankings. And also, when there's kind of been that head-to-head matchup between McIlroy and Spieth, Rory has wound up winning that nearly every single time. What's interesting to me, and I looked up a couple of numbers, and perhaps the truest Jordan Spieth fans are already aware of this intuitively, but I think it's important to go over the numbers. In the PGA Tour, he ranks 66th in driving distance, 97th in driving accuracy percentage, 82nd in greens and regulation percentage. Those are not numbers you would expect from the number 1 in the FedEx Cup point standings. So why is he so successful? Well, Strokes gained tee to green is seventh. Seventh. An analytic basically determining how well you are getting from the tee to the green and how you're able to do that. In putting, he's ninth. Total putting, he's second. Total driving efficiency is 12th. Rough proximity is first. Scrambling is 14th, which was very important at the Colonial given just how narrow those courses are. Putting average is first, especially 20 to 25 feet, and he's almost never three-putted in virtually the entire season. Usually gets on. Up and downs are pretty easy. Sometimes he does even better than that given how well he plays off the rough. One of the things that I did while I was out at the Pro-Am for that round, I talked to Jordan Spieth about his putting. And though there were a couple of shorties that he missed at the Colonial, he still feels very, very confident with the flat stick. Let's listen.
Throughout every length, my putting is up towards the top. I just missed a couple of them last week. It's going to happen. The longer ones are more luck-based. The shorter ones can still bounce or, whatever. It just happens. I'm just going to keep working on the same things. I'm not putting a particular focus on anything special, not looking much into it. My stroke is right where it needs to be. Alignment, speed control. I just got a little off in my head when I was after that triple. I was just kind of wanted to get that round in, and I missed a couple short ones in that second round. But yeah, mid to long range, I see the lines great. I consider that a very big strength of mine is longer putts, being able to find out where I'm going to feed it using more of your imagination. And I've gotten a lot better over the last year and a half inside 10 feet, like significantly better. So I've got a lot of confidence there too. It's just that I make a lot more putts inside 12 feet than I do outside 12 feet, I promise you. It's just that compared to tour average, maybe last week it didn't look that way. But all in all, I'm very confident from any length with the putter right now.
So as we look ahead to the Nelson, obviously this is a very different golf course than the Colonial for a variety of reasons. Interesting note, as much as this is his home course, or his home tournament, so to speak, and I use air quotes, you can't see them though, he hasn't had the same success at the Nelson as he has in a lot of other tournaments. His best finisher is 16th, and he did that when he was a kid. Now he's had a few years of seasoning, and there's always been that kind of bad round or bad couple of rounds that have kind of snuck up on him. So while he has all this momentum coming in, history suggests that he may not have the kind of dominance that you would like to see. But at the same time, he's Jordan Spieth, and he seems to do whatever he wants.
Okay, you brought up his long-hitting numbers or lack thereof. How do you think that will come into play with the course being as soggy as it is right now with all the rain that has come through DFW?
The soggy conditions make things very interesting, but as we saw at the Colonial, he can adjust to just about anything. If he has one bad hole, then things may very well fall apart, like that second round where the horrible horseshoe pretty much engulfed his game, ending up with a triple bogey there. I don't think they're kinds of holes at the Nelson that would, entice a golfer to the worst possible results. I don't think that's going to happen here. So I would think there would be a more consistent outing by Spieth, and given, like we said last week with the Colonial, maybe this field isn't as strong as you would like for it to be, and that will also play into Spieth's situation. But again, with these soggy conditions, things get a little bit more unpredictable. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw when things come pouring down. Does this affect his game? It very well might, but given how great of a scrambler he is, given how great of a putter he is, maybe it won't be that big of a deal.
You also mentioned the diluted field going into play on Thursday. Jason Day just pulled out, the world's number 8 golfer, in between the soggy conditions, in between Spieth's familiarity with the course. This is set up for him to succeed right now, isn't it?
It pretty much is. All of the factors other than history suggest that he could very well win this golf tournament. And, he also mentioned that the gallery will be behind him, perhaps even more so than at the Colonial, because it will be insane. I mean, the Colonial really doesn't attract the galleries that the Nelson does for a variety of reasons. And, Spieth is not a Fort Worth guy. He's a Dallas guy, and Las Colinas tends to be more of a Dallas thing than the Colonial is. So all accounts suggest that Spieth could very well win this. And even as we talked about last week, because of the momentum and the opportunity to transition from that rough patch since winning the Masters to this particular point, it seemed like this was the perfect time for him to transition to the kind of golf that he's used to playing. And we said that there's a very good chance that he could win either at Colonial or at the Nelson. He came very, very close to the Colonial. Even he said that he was probably one stroke away from possibly forcing a playoff, and he was absolutely spot on with that prediction. I think this time, now that he's got that under his belt, he's got a little bit more momentum. Worst place, he finishes in second.
Isn't it nice that this prolonged slump, quote unquote, is finally over for Spieth?
Exactly. It seems like eons ago, too, doesn't it? It seems like the Masters thing was more recent.
And when we're talking about this slump, we're talking about 2 top 20 finishes. I mean, he missed the cut at the Players, but he made a couple of $100,000 in that prolonged slump leading into the Colonial.
Excellent golfers miss the cut at the Players. It is an unruly golf course, to say the least.
I'm sure Patrick Harrington right now is looking at this quote-unquote slump and just saying, shut up. Just shut up.
Not just him, lots of guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on to our last topic, high school football recruiting. And there is an interesting story that came out concerning consensus 5-star defensive tackle Ed Oliver committing to the Houston Cougars. Came from Houston Westfield High School. Houston beat out other big Texas schools and perhaps the front-runner LSU, who almost gets any defensive player they want. And as it turns out, the Cougars get Ed Oliver services. Now, it's important to look at a situation like this. This almost never happens. When you have somebody this highly touted go to what is essentially a mid-major school, a lot of people are going to naturally raise eyebrows. And though we're not suggesting that something really freaky is going on, I think it's still important to look at the skeptical perspective as to how something like this could go down. So first and foremost, his former high school coach got hired to coach tight ends at Houston.
Oh, what a coincidence.
What a coinky-dink. Now, this doesn't always work out when you hire a highly touted player's high school coach to be an assistant. That doesn't always work out, and oftentimes it's just for that one particular player that you hope can carry your program forward.
For every Danny Manning of the
exactly.
world, there are hundreds of other
that
examples.
Just don't pan out.
Exactly.
It doesn't always work and doesn't always function. And in fact, I would argue that it's almost never a good idea to do something like that. No matter how talented the high school football coach is, it just you lose those recruiting routes after a little while because the game is just so competitive. But that's what they did, and in the short term, it's worked out. Now, obviously, there's no letter of intent here. Nothing has been signed yet, so a number of things can happen. But while I was reading the story, it came to my attention that he is a consensus 5-star recruit. And the obvious question there is, well, what does it mean to be a consensus 5-star recruit? Well, it means a variety of different recruiting services have all said that they are 5 stars, that he is a 5-star recruit. And these recruiting services use a variety of different systems for determining how many stars a player should acquire. And some of these systems are not the most accurate things in the world. Some sites take the top talent, they rank them, divide them into groups, and then the top 50 maybe 5 stars, the next 50 get 4 stars, and it's all relative to the rest of the class. In other words, if classes are weak, 5 stars may be worse than 3 stars from other deeper classes. If you're in a particular position that's very, very thin, you may get 5 stars, but you may get beaten out by someone who's 1 year younger, 2 years younger, just because you may have had a lot of stars, but there was nobody who could really compete at your level within your own class. Others project what kind of an impact they will have at their school, so potential All-Americans get more stars than others. But again, that's very much an eyeball, put your thumb up in the air, and then figure it out. And the problem is not just that no one can agree upon a system, but it doesn't seem to be too analytic. Unlike the Combine where you have set specific numbers you can go on, both physically, psychologically, and mentally, in high school recruiting, it can be a real crapshoot. There's no real consistent system where you can go to and say, all right, it's obvious he's a 5-star recruit because of what he's done on the playing surface. There's so much subjectivity within high school football recruiting that it can make a college coach's job that much more difficult if they are using this metric in any way, shape, or form. Now, I talked to TCU's Gary Patterson about this phenomenon a couple of months ago, about how he has been able to build a solid program without having a lot of 5 or 4-star recruits, and this is what he had to say about it.
Possibly the players were a lot better than what they gave them credit for, if it comes down to stars. And I can tell you by going back and I save all my our highlight films of our recruiting classes. And there were some awfully good players that people called 2-stars if you just watch the film, of comparing them to some guys now that we recruit that are 4 stars, and then you look at, well, he was a 2-star, and you go, I think the system's a little bit off.
That's TCU's Gary Patterson talking about the star recruiting system. And Victor, I think the most important lesson to draw from something like this is you really don't know what you're going to get. There are a lot of great 5-star recruits who don't pan out at all in college. And there are a lot of horrible 2-star recruits who go on to do phenomenal things in the NFL.
Well, Ed Patterson is well aware of the overvalued star system. Just look at his own quarterback right there. He was just, recruited as an athlete. He, found the right system, and, it's paid dividends for them.
How many 2-star guys wound up winning the Super Bowl for the New England Patriots? A lot of them. I'm not sure there were any 5-star. I'd have to double check this, but I don't think there were any 5-star football players who wound up winning the Super Bowl for them. It is a very difficult system. And again, it's hard to make something like that analytic because of how broad it is. You've got a bajillion high school football teams, and you have so many different people trying to come in with their own information, and you have such small sample sizes because high school football seasons are so short. So this isn't so much a wag of the finger at high school football recruiting, but it is important to point out just how difficult it is to create an analytical base for high school football recruiting.
How would you approach this if you were a college coach, and in terms of analyzing talent, in terms of analyzing the star system? What would you place value on if you were trying to build a team, build a roster year after year?
It almost seems like you need to throw the star thing out the window, that this is just for the fans and perhaps nothing else. And it's nice for a player to acquire additional stars, and sometimes also too, you can market yourself to get more stars. If your tape looks particularly nice, if what you put on YouTube looks super duper impressive, and you're able to market yourself in such a way to where you look that much better than everybody else, well, then you acquire more stars. But that's more of a marketing ploy than it is your actual abilities. And so I know Nick Saban out of Alabama does a lot of personal evaluation. He'll go to a recruit's house and have them do a couple of things that may not mean very much to you and me, but to him, he's finding something very specific in terms of their stances, what they look like, how they eat, how they talk about their team. There's the mental and psychological that the stars may not bring in, but there's also the physical as well, where you can look at a tape and figure out, okay, the best running backs are able to do this at this particular level. The best linemen are able to do this at a particular level, and we know how to groom them and help them grow. And so much of college football really is coaching. The best programs have the best coaches. That's a absolute fact. The best programs have the best coaches, and they're able to convert just about anybody with some athletic skill into a true college football superstar. Like TCU, like Ohio State, like Alabama, any one of those programs that's been successful the last couple of years. And so the star thing may very well have nothing to do with the actual recruiting process. And even though typically the best classes tend to have those 4 and 5 star recruits, just about, they have more of those than they do anything else. And so the best programs tend to have the best recruiting classes. And so it can be accurate to a point, but
it's no guarantee.
But it's absolutely no guarantee. And you don't know what you're going to get. Now, I mean, there's always going to be that level of uncertainty, just like in the NFL when you have even more metrics you can go on. There's always going to be that level of uncertainty. But if you do it the right way, if you are evaluating the right things, looking for the right details, then you don't need various media to tell you that a particular player is good or not.
Yeah, well, look no further than the top 2 picks in this year's NFL draft. You have a consensus 5-star guy in Jameis Winston, who is going to a program like Florida State, and then you have a 3-star unknown out of Hawaii in Marcus Mariota, who was groomed and who was built up by that Chip Kelly fast-paced system into the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. So they could all come from anywhere.
Exactly. So on that note, we've got one more bit of business to wrap up. Our little moment of the week.
Not Zen.
Not Zen. No, that's been taken.
That's trademarked.
Yes, exactly. Let's go back to Jordan Spieth. He does a lot of things very, very well. He's a comedian. He plays golf. All right. Yes, he's a Renaissance man. A lot of things to like about him. He also is a bit of a meteorologist, and I think he has pinpointed why Texas has gotten more rain than it has in recent memory.
It really is amazing that we can host a tour event after the weather that we've been getting the last month. I mean, it's brutal. I saw a post today that I think it was since Bluebell closed, it's been raining in Texas, and it seems like that's the case. So, and it would make sense.
Even Jordan Spieth is able to figure out the weather phenomenon better than most. What a guy.
I think most Texans would agree with that right there.
Exactly. That is it for Fox 4 Sports Watch, our 4th episode. Hope you're enjoying them and hope you keep on demanding that we produce more of them. I don't know how you demand, but I'm sure you'll find some.
Even if you don't demand them, we'll still do them anyway.
Exactly, because, hey, we're
stuck with us.
We're still gainfully employed. Thank you, Fox 4. So,
your newsleader.
For Victor, I am Edward Egros. Take care.
On air, online, and totally mobile, this is Fox 4.